The sea raged beneath the moon's cold gaze, its waters dark as liquid sapphire, twisting in fury. Lightning split the sky, revealing two figures stinking beneath the waves, two mermaid sisters, their silver tails thrashing, their eyes wide with fear. Celaria and Valeth were prisoners of the ocean itself, bound by a judgment they could not escape. Above them, the ocean court loomed, a spectral gathering of glowing figures draped in flowing robes made of shifting water. At the center stood Queen Nerissa, their mother, her crown forged from coral and pearls that pulsed with ancient power. Her voice was as deep as the tides, laced with sorrow and finality. "You have broken the sacred law," she declared, her words carrying through the depths like a current. "The world above is forbidden, yet your hearts have strayed to where no siren should ever wander. For this, you shall be cast from the sea, banished to the world of men until the tides decide your fate." Celaria's heart pounded like the storm above. She reached for her sister, their hands clasping as a whirlpool formed beneath them. The water turned heavy, pressing against their skin, stealing their breath. The glow of their tails faded, replaced by unfamiliar limbs, human legs, fragile and unsteady. "No, please," Valeth cried, her voice lost to the churning abyss. The ocean did not listen. With one final, merciless pull, the sea expelled them. The awakening on the shore. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the world quiet, as if the sea itself mourned its lost daughters. The waves curled gently over the sands, pushing two lifeless forms onto the shore. Celaria stirred first. Her long pearl-white hair clung to her skin, damp and tangled like seaweed. Her body felt strange, too light, too bare without the comfort of the water around her. She gasped as she moved, sand scraping against her new limbs. Where her shimmering tail had once been, there were now pale legs, trembling beneath her weight. Beside her, Valeth lay motionless, dark-haired and striking as the midnight tides. Her beauty had always been untamed, like the wild sea. Celaria shook her gently, whispering her name. Slowly, Valeth's violet eyes fluttered open, filled with loss and fury. "We are cursed," she whispered. Celaria did not answer. She could still feel the sea inside her, a distant song echoing in her bones, but it was no longer hers to claim. Then the sound of boots crunching against the sand. The stranger with storm in his eyes. A shadow fell over them. A man stood there, tall and broad, his coat whipping in the wind. His eyes, dark as the ocean's depths, studied them with quiet intrigue. Captain Dorian Blacktide had seen many things in his years, storms that swallowed ships whole, treasures that turned men to monsters, but never had he found two women washed ashore, looking as if they had been carved from the sea itself. "Lost, are you?" His voice was rough, like waves crashing against a cliff. Celaria held her breath. There was something dangerous about him, something that stirred the very air between them. Dorian knelt, his fingers brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. A simple touch, yet it sent a shiver through her, something unfamiliar yet strangely known, like the pull of the tide against the shore, inevitable and inescapable. He smirked. "I don't believe in sea spirits, but you look like you were born from the waves." Celaria's lips parted, but no words came. Valeth, ever the protector, sat up sharply. "Who are you?" "Captain Dorian Blacktide," he answered smoothly, "and I believe fate has just gifted me something rare." His eyes lingered on Celaria, and in that moment she knew, whether by destiny or curse, their story had only just begun. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the horizon, its waves whispering secrets only the lost could hear. The sun hung low in the sky, its golden light spilling across the restless waters. On the deck of the Crimson Serpent, Celaria and Valeth stood side by side, their bare feet pressing against the worn wooden planks. They had left the shore behind, carried by fate onto a vessel ruled by men who thrived on chaos and conquest. Captain Dorian Blacktide stood before them, his coat billowing in the wind, the scent of salt and iron woven into his fabric. His presence commanded the deck like the tide commands the moon, inevitable, undeniable. The way he looked at Celaria was different from how he looked at her sister. His dark eyes, like storm-tossed waters, held a question he did not yet voice. You have no past, no home, and no name that I know of, he said, crossing his arms. That makes you ghosts. His gaze flickered between them. I don't believe in ghosts, so tell me, who are you? Valeth remained silent, her jaw set, her violet eyes daring him to challenge her. But Celaria, caught between fear and something else, a strange pull, like the tide calling her home, spoke first. We are travelers, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of a truth that was not quite a lie. We were lost at sea, and now we are here. Dorian studied her, his expression unreadable. Then you'll work for your passage. No one rides my ship for free. A murmur ran through the crew, grizzled sailors with faces carved by wind and time. A few laughed under their breath, while others exchanged knowing glances. Women aboard a pirate ship often meant trouble, and trouble was something they welcomed like an old friend. Celaria met Dorian's gaze and nodded. We will do what is needed. The pull of the tide days passed, and the sisters adjusted to the life of the ship. Valeth kept her distance from the crew, her sharp tongue keeping the men wary of her, while Celaria found herself drawn to the rhythm of the sea and to the man who commanded it. Dorian was unlike the stories she had heard of pirates. He was fierce, but not cruel. His hands, calloused by war and weather, held the wheel with the tenderness of a man who knew the ocean better than he knew himself. One night, as the ship sailed beneath a sky littered with silver stars, Celaria found herself standing at the bow, the wind tugging at her hair like a playful spirit. She closed her eyes, listening to the hush of the waves, feeling the heartbeat of the sea beneath her feet. You look like you belong here, came a voice behind her. She turned, finding Dorian watching her, his expression softer in the moonlight. She smiled faintly. I was born in the water. Dorian stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the salt in his hair, the scent of leather and steel clinging to him. A woman born in the sea, with no past and no fear. That's the kind of story men would kill to believe. She tilted her head, searching his face. And you? Do you believe in stories? His lips quirked into a smirk, but something in his eyes was unreadable. I believe in what I can touch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ocean stretched before them, endless and dark, but here, on this ship, under this sky, there was warmth, a quiet hum between them like a song half remembered. Celaria could feel it, the invisible thread that pulled her toward him, something deeper than curiosity, stronger than reason. It was the same pull that drew the tides to the shore over and over, no matter how many times they were cast away. Dorian's fingers brushed hers where they rested on the wooden railing, just a touch, fleeting as a breath. But in that moment, the sea held its breath, and Celaria knew she was no longer lost. She had merely found a different kind of ocean, and it had a name. Dorian Blacktide. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the Crimson Serpent, its surface rippling beneath the moon's silver glow. The ship sailed in the quiet of the night, its sails full, its lanterns flickering like fireflies against the darkness. The crew had long since retired to their hammocks, leaving only the wind and waves to whisper through the wooden decks. Celaria stood near the railing, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood, her heart caught between two worlds. The scent of salt and aged timber filled her lungs, but beneath the ship, deep in the black waters, she could still feel the echoes of the sea calling to her. It was a distant hum, a melody sung in a tongue only she and Valeth could understand. She closed her eyes and listened. A voice, soft, distant. Come home, lost daughter. A shiver ran down her spine. She turned sharply, but there was nothing, only the rolling waves and the vast sky. You hear it, don't you? Valeth's voice was quiet but certain. She stepped beside her sister, her violet eyes dark with knowing. Unlike Celaria, she had not softened to this world of men. She still held herself like a queen in exile, unwilling to yield to fate's cruel hand. It's getting louder, Celaria admitted. Valeth exhaled, staring out at the endless sea. The ocean does not forgive. It watches, it waits, her fingers tightened against the railing. We do not belong here, Celaria. Celaria glanced back toward the captain's quarters, where a faint light still burned. She had not told Valeth of the nights she spent there, of the quiet moments stolen between heartbeats. Dorian was unlike any man she had ever known. He carried the sea in his soul, the storm in his eyes. And yet, there was a gentleness in him, a tether pulling her further from the life she had once known. Maybe we do, Salaria whispered. Valeth turned to her sharply, her gaze cutting like a blade. You've let him sink into you, haven't you? Salaria did not answer. Valeth let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You are a fool if you think love can break a curse. Salaria looked away, but her sister's words clung to her like the mist rolling in from the sea. Storm in the captain's eyes. She found him where she always did, at the helm, his hands resting on the wheel, guiding the ship through the midnight waters. Dorian did not turn when she approached, though he must have heard her steps, light as they were against the deck. You should be resting, he murmured. So should you, she countered, stepping beside him. His smirk was faint, barely there, but the moonlight caught it. I sleep when the sea allows it. Salaria tilted her head, watching him. He looked carved from the very storms that shaped the ocean, his dark hair windswept, his jaw rough with the shadow of unshaven days. There was a weariness in him, a weight only those who had seen too much could carry. And yet when he finally looked at her, there was something else in his gaze, something unspoken. She swallowed. Do you ever feel as if the sea is watching? Dorian studied her for a long moment, then turned his eyes back to the water, always. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with something neither could name, something lingering in the space between breaths. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers in a touch so fleeting, so quiet, that it could have been a trick of the wind. But she felt it. She felt everything. And she knew in that moment she was sinking, not into the sea, but into him. And there was no saving her now. The sky was painted in hues of gold and violet as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the crimson serpent. The sea, once restless, had stilled, as if the world itself held its breath. The air was thick with something unseen, something that curled around the edges of reality like a whisper waiting to be heard. Salaria stood at the ship's stern, her pearl-white hair cascading down her back, the wind playing with its strands like the tide teasing the shore. The world of men had begun to feel less foreign, yet the ocean's song still murmured in her bones. She was caught between two tides, one that called her home and one that tethered her here. A familiar presence approached. Dorian. He did not speak at first. He only stood beside her, his arms resting against the railing, his gaze lost in the horizon. The scent of salt and steel clung to him, the remnants of a man who had spent his life carving a path through the waters with no home but his ship. You look like you're waiting for something, he finally said, his voice low, like the rolling tide before a storm. Salaria did not turn to him. Perhaps I am. A smirk played at the edges of his lips. And what does a woman born of the sea wait for? She exhales softly, to know if she can ever truly belong on land. His dark eyes flickered toward her, unreadable yet piercing. And what have you decided? She turned to face him then, searching his face, tracing the rough lines carved by wind and war. He was not like the men of the sea she had once feared, those who chased sirens for their voices, who sought mermaids for their magic. Dorian was something else. Something dangerous, yes, but not cruel. Something that pulled at her like the undertow of the deepest waters. I don't know yet, she admitted. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in a movement slow as the tide's caress, his fingers reached for a strand of her hair, lifting it as if testing whether she was real or merely another dream the sea had conjured. You are unlike anything I have ever seen, he murmured. And I have seen wonders, Salaria. Her heart fluttered, too human, too fragile. She had been sculpted by the sea, untamed and untouchable. And yet, here, beneath his gaze, she felt small, not weak, but seen. A gust of wind carried the scent of brine and old wood between them, filling the space that neither dared to cross. Dorian let the strand of her hair slip from his fingers, his gaze never leaving hers. Then he turned away, his footsteps heavy against the deck as he walked toward the helm. Salaria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A warning in the wind. Velith was watching. She stood in the shadows near the mast, her violet eyes sharp, her expression unreadable. When Salaria approached, her sister's words were a blade hidden in silk. You forget yourself. Salaria stiffened. I forget nothing. Vela tilted her head, the moonlight catching the curve of her jaw. Then why do you let him pull you beneath the waves? Salaria swallowed, glancing toward the captain's quarters. The door was shut, but she could still feel the ghost of his touch, the weight of his gaze. You think you are sinking into something beautiful, Velith continued, voice quiet, cutting. But love is not the tide, Salaria. It does not carry you home. It drowns you. A chill coiled around Salaria's heart. The wind howled through the sails. The sea was watching, and it did not forgive. Night fell upon the crimson serpent like a velvet curtain, the sky a vast expanse of ink spattered with silver stars. The ocean lay calm beneath the ship, its surface a mirror reflecting the glow of the lantern swaying gently in the wind. A hush had settled over the crew, their voices fading into murmurs as sleep claimed them one by one. But sleep did not find Salaria. She stood near the bow, the salt air curling around her skin like a lover's breath. The sea called to her, whispering in a voice only she and Velith could understand. It sang of forgotten depths, of kingdoms carved from coral and pearl, of a past that still reached for her like waves upon the shore. Yet another voice pulled her in a different direction. A step behind her, a presence that had become too familiar. She did not turn. You are always watching. Dorian's chuckle was low, rough like the tide scraping against the hull of a ship. Perhaps I am waiting. She turned now, her silver hair gleaming under the moonlight, her gaze unreadable. For what? His dark eyes locked onto hers, searching as if he could map the uncharted waters of her soul. He stepped closer, slow as the rolling tide, until only a breath of space remained between them. You tell me, he murmured. Salaria's heart was steady with something deeper, something primal, stirred within her. He was a man of the sea, untamed and unrelenting. Yet there was restraint in him, a tether that held him just beyond reach. She tested it. Reaching up, she traced a finger along the collar of his open shirt, where the fabric met sun-worn skin. A sailor's life had left its marks upon him, scars like ghostly whispers, muscles sculpted by years of battling both man and nature. He did not move away. Instead, his breath deepened, his fingers brushing against her waist with the gentleness of a tide lapping at the shore. You are not like them, she whispered. Dorian tilted his head. Them? The men who hunt the sea for gold, who carve their names into the world with blood and steel. Her fingers traced lower, feeling the quiet power beneath his skin. You are not just a pirate. He exhaled a quiet laugh. And you are not just a woman. The truth sat between them, unspoken but undeniable. A pull, a gravity neither could escape. His fingers curled around her wrist, not to stop her, but to anchor himself, to prove she was not just another dream lost to the waves. He lowered his head, the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek, his lips mere inches from hers. Tell me, he said, his voice a hushed command. What are you? Salaria's lips parted, the words caught between truth and desire. But before she could speak, a gust of wind howled through the sails and from the shadows. A voice. You are a fool. Vela stood near the mast, her violet eyes dark with warning. The moment shattered like glass against the tide. Dorian stepped back, his expression unreadable, his touch gone as if it had never been. Salaria exhaled, the air suddenly too cold, the space between them an ocean of its own. Vela's gaze never left her. You let yourself forget what you are. Salaria turned away, her fingers curling against the wooden railing, the taste of something unfinished lingering in the air. The sea was still watching, and it did not forgive. The night was thick with mist, clinging to the crimson serpent like a ghostly shroud. The ocean, once calm, now churned with restless waves, whispering secrets to the wind. The lanterns flickered, casting golden glows upon the deck, but even their light could not reach the shadows that lingered in Salaria's heart. She stood alone by the bow, her silver hair catching the moon's glow, her eyes fixed upon the horizon. The salt air wrapped around her like a familiar lover, yet she felt the weight of something foreign pressing against her chest. A presence behind her. She did not need to turn to know who it was. Dorian. The warmth of him reached her before his touch did, his body close but not yet touching, his breath deep as the ocean. He did not speak at first, only stood with her, as if the silence held all the answers neither of them dared to voice. "You've been avoiding me," he finally murmured. Solaria closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind carry her thoughts before answering. "Velis says love is a drowning tide." Dorian exhaled a quiet laugh. She's not wrong. She turned now, meeting his gaze, dark, unwavering, filled with something untamed. "Then why did we keep stepping into the waves?" His hand lifted, fingers brushing against her arm, trailing down as if tracing the path of water over skin. It was a touch not meant to claim, nor to capture, only to understand. "Because some ties are worth drowning in," he whispered. Solaria's breath hitched, her pulse thrumming like a distant storm. The space between them shrank, drawn by forces neither could fight. His fingers reached her waist, firm yet gentle, his touch igniting something deep within her, a fire beneath the sea. She lifted a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. He was strong, unyielding, yet here, in this moment, she could feel the edges of his restraint. "Dorian." Her voice was barely a breath. He leaned in, the warmth of his lips hovering near her ear, his voice a tide pulling her under. "Tell me to stop." But she didn't. Instead, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding him there, afraid to let go. His hand slid to the small of her back, drawing her into the gravity of him, their breaths mingling, the world shrinking to nothing but the space where they met. His lips brushed against her temple, a whisper or a promise, a vow not yet spoken. The moment hung between them, fragile, endless. Then, a scream. The spell shattered. Solaria turned sharply as the sound ripped through the air, chilling as the wind before a storm. "Velith." She stood at the stern, her violet eyes wide with something between rage and fear. The waves behind her had darkened, twisting into something unnatural, something ancient. "The sea has come for us," she whispered, and her voice was no longer that of a woman, but of something older. A wave rose, towering high, reaching toward the crimson serpent like a hand of the deep, its roar deafening. Solaria's heart clenched. The ocean had been patient, but it no longer forgave. The sea had awoken. Towering waves crashed against the crimson serpent, sending sprays of salt and foam into the howling night. The sky had been swallowed by darkness, the moon lost behind storm clouds that twisted like a serpent in the heavens. The ship groaned under the weight of the storm, its sails whipping wildly in the wind. Solaria clutched the railing, her silver hair drenched, her breath coming in short gasps. She had seen the ocean's fury before, but never like this. This was no ordinary storm. This was a warning, a punishment. Velit stood on the deck, her violet eyes glowing with something ancient, her voice barely audible above the roaring winds. "They have come for us." Dorian's boots slammed against the deck as he fought against the lurching ship. "Who?" he demanded, his voice sharp as the edge of a cutlass. Solaria already knew. The sea had been patient. It had whispered to her in the quiet of the waves, in the lull of the tide. But she had ignored its call. She had let herself be pulled into something dangerous, something forbidden. And now, it would claim her. A monstrous wave rose before them, its crest crowned with foam and fury, and within it, figures. Not of men, not of creatures, something in between. Their bodies shimmered like the scales of deep-sea beasts, their eyes glowing with the cold fire of the abyss. Their voices rang through the storm, not words, but a song, haunting and unrelenting. Solaria's heart pounded. "The Tideborn," she breathed. Velit's face was grim. "They will not leave without you." Dorian stepped in front of her, sword drawn, his stance unshaken. "They will have to fight me first." Solaria's fingers found his arm, tightening around the fabric of his soaked shirt. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They are not like the men you fought before." "I don't care." His voice was steel. The sea roared again, and in the next heartbeat, the Tideborn moved. They crashed onto the deck like living waves, their forms shifting between water and flesh. The crew fought, Blades clashing against the impossible, steel met liquid, cutting through bodies that reformed like mist. Dorian swung his sword with deadly precision, striking down one creature, only to have another rise from the water beside him. His breath was ragged, his muscles straining against a foe that would not fall. Celeria felt it before she saw it. A presence behind her. Cold fingers wrapped around her wrist, and suddenly, she was weightless. Dragged. Pulled toward the water's edge. Celeria. Dorian's voice cut through the chaos. Their eyes met, his filled with fury, hers with fear. She reached for him, but the tide was stronger. It coiled around her like an embrace, pulling her toward the abyss. Dorian lunged forward, his hand catching hers just as the sea claimed her. Their fingers entwined, his grip unyielding. The world slowed. The storm faded. It was just them, her breath mingling with his, the warmth of his skin against the cold of the sea. "Don't let go," she whispered. Dorian gritted his teeth, his arms straining against the force that sought to steal her away. Never. But the sea had other plans. A wave rose between them, an unrelenting wall of water, and in one final, merciless pull, she was gone. The ocean swallowed her whole, and the crimson serpent was left behind. Darkness, silence. The sea held Celeria in its cold embrace, dragging her down into the depths where time did not exist. The water whispered against her skin, calling her home, yet her heart beat for something else, something above, something warm. Dorian. She had felt his grip, his desperation, the unyielding promise in his eyes. But the ocean did not care for promises. It had taken her, and now she belonged to it once more. A presence stirred around her, shadows shifting, silver eyes watching. The Tideborn had brought her back to the place she once called home, but it no longer felt like one. A voice, deep and ancient, rippled through the water. "You forgot what you are." Celeria turned slowly, meeting the gaze of the one who ruled beneath the tides. His form was shifting, half man, half current, his features both sharp and fluid. "You stole me away," she whispered, her voice a soundless echo in the deep. "We reclaimed what was always ours." His eyes flickered like light on water. "You are not meant for their world." Celeria's heart ached. Images of the crimson serpent, of the man who had risked everything for her, flashed before her eyes. The ship was her freedom. Dorian was her choice. "I do not belong here anymore," she said, her voice stronger now. The Tideborn leader circled her, the water shifting with his movement. "And yet you are here." She closed her eyes. She could still feel Dorian's hand in hers, the warmth of his breath on her skin, the way he had looked at her, as if she was not a creature of the sea, but a woman of the stars, a woman worth fighting for. Something inside her stirred, a power she had not felt before. She opened her eyes. "I choose my own fate," she said. The sea trembled, and then she swam. Faster than she ever had, cutting through the water like a blade, her body no longer held down by the will of others. The Tideborn called after her, but she did not stop. The surface was far, but she could see the light, the shimmer of the world above. Her chest burned. The pressure clawed at her, but she did not stop. Then, a shadow above. A shape. A man. Dorian. He had not left. He was in the water, searching, his arms moving in strong, desperate strokes. His name burst from her lips in a stream of bubbles. He turned, saw her. And then he was reaching for her. Their hands met, fingers locking, the pull of the ocean no longer strong enough to keep them apart. He wrapped an arm around her, dragging her up, until at last, their heads broke the surface. Air rushed into her lungs. She gasped, blinking against the starlight. The storm had passed. The sea was calm once more. Dorian held her close, his forehead resting against hers as they floated together beneath the moon's glow. "I thought I lost you," he murmured. She pressed a trembling hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "The sea tried," she whispered, "but it was never stronger than us." A slow, knowing smile curved his lips. "Then let's leave it behind." The crew hauled them back aboard the Crimson Serpent, voices rising in cheers, in laughter, in relief. But Celeria barely heard them. Her eyes were only on Dorian, his face still wet from the sea, his gaze filled with something deeper than the ocean itself. And as the ship set sail toward the horizon, she knew she had finally found home.